Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Dr. Brandy Cummings. She's a mom of two and has her doctorate in clinical nutrition. Her passion for reproduction-focused nutrition really stems from her own struggles with illness, infertility, and feeling forgotten by conventional medicine, which I think a lot of us can relate with. After overcoming severe mold exposure that triggered the loss of her first pregnancy, Dr. Cummings began researching overlooked causes of pregnancy and lingering postpartum symptoms such as mold, parasites, and reactivated viral infections. Her practice solely focuses on supporting women from preconception through the fourth trimester, with a special focus on chronic, unexplainable symptoms. So I think that this is an area that needs really a lot of attention. Unfortunately, Western medicine doesn't do a really great job at finding the root cause of what is going on. So today we'll be diving into functional medicine, nutrition, the impact that preconception prep can have on future generations, and how environmental illness and their impact really can affect maternal health. Welcome, Dr. Brandy. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, and I'd love to just dive right in. How did you come to discover that it was mold that played a role in your pregnancy loss? Because I know a lot of people can struggle with even getting like a proper diagnosis, because a lot of doctors just are not well educated when it comes to mold exposure, toxicity, and treatment.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. The way I found out, I did some testing. I did some mycotoxin testing to kind of help determine that. But I think I innately knew before the testing came back, because of the building that I was working in at the time was a historical building, and in the basement there was just a ton of visible black mold. For me, it seemed like a likely contributing factor. Of course, I'll never know for 100% sure if that was in play, but seems extremely likely, especially because after I cleaned that up and tried to get pregnant again, I haven't had those same issues since.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious, did you ever go to your doctor and tell them that you think you have like mold toxicity or mold issues?
Yeah, I did. Well, so I went to my boss in the building, first of all, and they did absolutely nothing about it. And then I was working with my doctor because I was feeling extremely terrible. It wasn't just having a miscarriage. That was not my only symptom. I was feeling horrible. I had extreme vertigo. It really got to a point where I wasn't able to fully take care of myself. I had erythema nodosum on the shins of my legs, which are big, red, hot kind of lumps on my shins. That was unbearable. And I kept asking, and I just really got the runaround. I got a referral to the ENT, who thought I might have Meniere's disease, and that wasn't it. Of course, blood work ran, and then that was about as far as they were going to go with me. And then I got a referral to psychiatry.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I was kind of wondering because I've had a past guest on who also was dealing with mold. And yeah, it sounds like people just get the runaround when it comes to mold. from your employer if that is a place that maybe you're being exposed to. And then a lot of times doctors just we don't understand how to diagnose and treat mold is what my understanding is for a lot of like conventional doctors. So it sounds like you realized what was going on and you turned it around for yourself. So what did that look like?
So I quit my job, and at the time I was not in a financial place to do, but I felt like I didn't have a choice because in my mind, I got to a point where things were so bad that in my mind, the choices were to either get better or die, which like sounds really extreme now that I'm kind of on the other side of it, but in the moment, that those were the only two options. And at the time, honestly, I felt like I was okay with either way because I just couldn't continue like I was continuing. And so I quit my job and then I went all in on my health and found the right practitioners on board. I actually went to a conference, which I was not feeling well enough to go to, but I decided to go anyway. I was so sick. I remember I couldn't even listen to the keynote speaker. I had to go outside and like literally find a tree to lay down underneath because I was just so overstimulated. But I found a practitioner. I met a practitioner at this conference, and I feel like that is the only reason the universe like brought me there. And he really helped me get back to baseline and just did all the things, all diet, environment, movement, really supporting myself on a cellular level. And it worked. And it was like a light switched. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually going to work. I'm actually going to get my life back. And I felt hope for the first time because I had been dealing with that for a couple of years at this point. And then kind of in the middle of working through that and feeling so much better is when I got pregnant again. So I kind of had to halt and pivot my approach to be much more supportive of pregnancy and not so heavy on detoxification.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely think that you were there for a reason to meet with that practitioner. And so, would the timeline be then after you felt better, maybe after you had the baby? Is that when you set up your own practice to really support women in that same season of life?
So I had already had my practice, but at that time it was more general. And it was more, I would say, like application based. Like I was doing a lot more like farmers market tours and kitchen audits, and it wasn't very clinical in nature. And so after I went through this experience, and then, I mean, this is a whole different conversation, but then I experienced a whole nother slew of being gaslit by medical providers during pregnancy and postpartum. By the time I came out of the other side of that, and this was after I had finished my master's degree. That's when I pivoted everything because after going through that whole experience from preconception to postpartum, I was just like, absolutely not. I didn't know that this is how women are being treated and the experience that they're having, and I'm not here for it. So that's when the whole pivot came.
Okay, love it. That's interesting. So that sounds quite similar to my journey. I was working as a pharmacist, experienced the fertility struggles through postpartum. And yeah, that's really when my eyes were open as well. And just, yeah, women deserve better than the type of care and lack of education and all the things. So I love that. And I would really like to just talk about mold, parasites, Lyme, heavy metals, like how common and how frequently are these things affecting maternal health and outcomes and really essentially mostly going under the radar?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of a two-part answer. And I also want to preface this conversation by saying none of this information is meant to be fear-mongering, which it can certainly come across in that way. And during that time period of preconception to postpartum is very vulnerable. And especially if we struggled with infertility, I don't want anybody to walk away from this conversation freaked out or upset or, oh my gosh, I didn't know, and now I have my baby. because when we know better, we can do better. And the body is amazing, and the body can recover from so many things. And so I just want to preface it with that. This is meant to be an empowering conversation and not one of inciting fear in people. So when it comes to things like mold, heavy metals, things that we're exposed to in our environment, they're extremely prevalent, right? I think all of us have some level of exposure. And so it's how well can our body drain and detox those things? How well are our drainage pathways, our emunctory pathways open, and how well are they functioning so that our body can interact with our environment and still remain resilient and be robust and not be so sensitive to every little thing or every little food they eat, or that people can't walk into a moldy building. It shouldn't be like that. We should be able to have a certain level of tolerance to what's happening in our environment. And the problem comes when our total body burden is just so high, and or our drainage pathways are not working as well, and we're not keeping up with the load that's coming in. And the other point I want to make when it comes to things like parasites, viruses, what I see so many practitioners doing and patients too is that's what they're trying to go after. Parasites are really hot on the internet right now. And they're trying to go after the parasites or go after the EBV or the H. pylori or whatever it is, thinking that that's going to be the root cause, right? And what's really important to remember, these bugs are all around us, right? They're in our environment, they're a part of our environment. If we tested everybody for EBV, most people are going to have EBV, right? Whether it's reactivated or not. They're so common, like the bugs are already inside of us. But the problem comes when we have exposure to a poison, whether that's a poison, let's say glyphosate, or a toxin, or a stressful event, or some kind of trigger of some kind. These bugs can then change shape, undergo something called pleomorphism, where they are now causing symptoms and becoming more problematic. And like in the case of parasites, parasites are toxin sponges. So if the toxicity level is high, parasitic load might also be high because they're trying to sop up all of those toxins. And so I just want to make that point to where, yeah, I think it's important that we should be addressing parasites, that we should probably put ourselves through a periodic deworming, if you will, just like we do with our pets. But despite what the internet would want you to believe, that's not always the smoking gun, the root cause. We always have to ask ourselves, why is the parasitic load high, or why is the overgrowth high in the case of Candida or SIBO? Those are not root cause. What is it about the terrain that's driving that overgrowth to happen? And then we get to the root cause.
Absolutely. These are opportunistic things. So what was the environment, the lifestyle, nutrition choices, whatever it may be, that really allowed them to take over and move in? So I loved how you really prefaced that and explained everything. Let's see here. Where do we want to go with this? So
There's
let's
a million directions.
yeah, there's a lot. Let's say someone is trying to get pregnant and maybe they have one or a couple of these different things that we just talked about, mold, parasites, maybe candida, SIBO, or heavy metals. What would you say is the best step to move forward? Because a lot of times, and I know you had mentioned parasites are like hot on the internet and we want to target the parasites, but in my mind, there are some steps that should happen before we start targeting the mold, the candida, whatever it is, so then we can properly detox and eliminate these things.
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind here. First is just like I said, making sure that drainage and emunctory pathways are open. So I explain it to clients like this. If your sink was clogged and your sink bowl was very dirty, Would you go in there and start scrubbing the sink, or would you clear the clog first? You have to clear the clog first, or you're going to end up with a bigger mess than you had in the first place. And so making sure that drainage pathways are open, which is making sure that you're pooping every day, making sure that you're moving your body, making sure that you have the ability to sweat. A lot of my clients tell me, like, gosh, I just can't sweat, which is a signal to me that we need more support with lymphatics, making sure that we're sleeping and your glymphatic system is working. The glymphatic system is how your brain cleans up its debris, and that's almost entirely activated during sleep. So making sure we're sleeping, making sure that we're supporting our nervous system, which is going to support our mitochondria, which is kind of the switch that turns this whole thing on or off. Of course, making sure we're hydrated, supporting the kidneys. There's so many things we can do within the realm of drainage. And then as a concurrent thing, I truly feel like so much of the issue with the state of health that we're in is driven by our disconnection from nature. And the more that we can focus on that reconnection, which is getting out in the sunrise, having that infrared light from the sun, give that signal to our eyes to make melatonin 14 hours later, and not have that artificial blue light from our phone be the first light that our eyes are being seen. So really focusing on our light exposure, what that looks like in the day, in the afternoon, in the evening, getting outside, getting grounded, moving your body, eating the food that is grown locally and seasonally to you, because that food is getting the messages from the sun as well. And then you are connecting and things are starting to fall into place. I find that when people, the more disconnected from nature they are, the more dysfunctional their circadian rhythms are, the more food that they're eating that is not from the area that they live in, the more problems they tend to have. And so by opening up drainage, doing what we can to lower the total body burden and what we're exposed to, and then reconnecting to nature, those three things I feel like will move the needle so much before we ever even start like a parasite cleanse or attacking the thing that the internet is so quick to jump to as it's because it's exciting, it's new, it's sexy, it's exciting. You might see something that you pass after a bowel movement and it's, oh my gosh, and there's a shock value there. But we can't skip over this foundational work and expect that to be the thing that gets us where we want to go.
So it sounds like you have a very much like foundational food first approach before jumping maybe to different supplements or things like that. But I feel like a lot of people just tell me what supplement I need to take so I can feel better
Yeah.
and get rid of this. But it really is so important to anchor in all of these foundations before we do that.
Yeah, it's almost like I have a lot of frustration with what I see on the internet with in the functional medicine community. And I identify as a functional medicine practitioner. That's what my training is in. But if all we're doing as functional practitioners is matching a nutraceutical to the issue, that's really not that much different or better than matching a pharmaceutical to the issue. Maybe less side effects or things like that. But to me, I'm like, that's not the play. That's not the answer. So moving past functional medicine into this more foundational medicine, I think is key. And if you try to supplement your way out of a bad situation without this foundational approach, you're not going to get there. And I wouldn't even say, I mean, I have a doctorate in clinical nutrition. Like I am all about like food first, nutrition. I'm all about it. But even beyond that, I feel like it's like the reconnection to nature first, even above food, which is a bold statement for me to say. But I find that the more connected you are to nature, the more you are optimizing your circadian rhythm, hacking your light exposure, getting your feet on the ground, the less the food matters. Which doesn't mean we should go swing the other way and eat whatever we want and all the processed garbage. That is not what I'm saying. But people like to give too much power to one specific thing, to the food or to the supplements or whatever it is. And that just doesn't work long term.
Hmm. I agree with you. I think that when you recultivate that connection, everything else just really seems to kind of fall in place, right? When we're well rested, our circadian rhythm is working the way it should be because we are getting that correct light exposure and all of those things connected with ourselves, with nature, community. Nutrition doesn't feel like a chore anymore. We're just more
Right.
drawn to making more aligned like nutrition choices. And then ideally, getting all those foundations in place, you won't need supplements and all of those things. Like maybe if you do have something deeper going on, you might need that to support you and kind of getting back to that baseline. But I do think that these are the foundations that are so important. And I'll just kind of share my journey. So the last week or so, I have really decided to make it a point to get outside, getting that first sunlight, taking my glasses off, getting my feet into the ground. And I wear an Aura ring at nighttime. And my levels have skyrocketed. My HRV is
Yeah.
amazing. My resilience has gone up to exceptional, which is like the highest level that it will let you do. My sleep like number was so good the other night. It was like, what did you do today? Like, why was your sleep so good? And that has been the biggest change that I've made is getting myself out of bed, not looking at my phone, and just going outside for 5, 10 minutes, eating my breakfast outside. I mean, I live in upstate New York. So obviously in the winter time, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. Like I'm not going to put my feet in the snow necessarily for maybe 1 second, but just taking advantage of the season that I'm in. And I can tell you that it's not, I don't think that we give it enough credit. But seeing the values change on my Aura ring so drastically and also in the way that I feel, it's yes, there is something to this totally. So I encourage anyone who's listening to this episode, just make a goal of doing it for 1 week. And I'm telling you, you're going to feel so much better that you're going to want to keep doing it.
Yeah, 100%. And even when it's cloudy or there's snow or whatever, or there's leaves on the ground, the snow, the leaves, they absorb that sunlight too. When we have that reflection, there's still so much benefit. And I don't think it's such a bad thing to allow ourselves to get a little bit uncomfortable from time to time, like standing in the cold or maybe extending the time period between we eat, maybe doing some fasting. I'm hesitant to bring that up because I think it's very nuanced in women, and then it's even more nuanced in the fertility pictures. I just want to put out that disclaimer, but just getting a little bit comfortable being uncomfortable and building that resilience in our body, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, it's my goal to continue it. Rain or shine, snow or not, we will see. I don't necessarily like being cold, but I agree with you. I think, you know, pushing ourselves and kind of allowing for that expansion to really come about. Breath work is also something I've really dived into, and never would I think that I could do like a 2 minute retention of not breathing in or out. And I've been
Yeah.
able to pick it up pretty quickly. So I almost think that sometimes we think that we can't accomplish something. It sounds too hard, but it really isn't, especially once you dive into it and just ease your way in as feels right to you. But yeah, I'm loving our conversation here. I would love to know and wrap this up with this bow here. Doing this preconception prep, anchoring in these foundations, what type of outcome can that have on future generations?
So there's a term called transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. And so what that means is that we can pass down different genetic mutations, SNPs to future generations. And we can see this has happened in the research if you look up the Dutch hunger winter, when there was a time of famine and not a lot of food. And when they look at the children who of the moms who were pregnant during that time, and they have followed them into their 60s and beyond, they have much worse health outcomes compared to babies that were not in utero during something like the Dutch hunger winter. And so it's so important to me. This is the ultimate in preventative medicine, right? Like, if we really want to turn this ship around, let's catch these people 2 generations before they're even born. And everything that a person, man or woman, does to improve their health prior to conception has a real potential to not just improve their health and their baby's health, but also their future grandchild's health, which is just wow, because all that work that you're doing to improve your health, people are going to reap the benefits of that for literally decades. And the more people we have to do that, the faster we're going to get back to a place where, in general, the whole population is generally healthy, like it was, many decades ago. Because if we are just focusing on improving the health of the people that come into our office, I think that's great. And I think that's amazing. And we need to continue to do that. But then it stops there because they're not having any more children. But if we back up a couple generations in this preconception space, this is such a sacred, powerful space that holds so much potential to truly change the world and leave a legacy. That's the key, because those benefits will continue to be seen well after the grandparents have gone and passed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure that's a large reason why you do the work that you do. It is a huge reason why I do the work that I do, because it is such a delicate season of life, that preconception phase. And I think that you only know what you know, but we become so kind of enveloped in achieving the pregnancy on our timeline, creating the baby registry, the nursery, that we forget a lot of these foundational things that really are going to have a greater impact on your kids than the color of the nursery wall or whatever it may be. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit about your freebie and where they can find you and connect with you and be able to learn more from you as well.
So I have a mold questionnaire to share as my gift to you and your audience. It is perfect for somebody I never really thought about that. I wonder if this is maybe part of what's going on or part of my issue. It's full of information and kind of questions to do a self-audit and kind of evaluate if you think this is something you need to look into deeper. And the name of my practice is Pivotal Origins. So you can find me there at pivotalorigins.com or on Instagram with the same handle, Facebook as well. But in all honesty, I'm more active on Instagram. So I encourage you to find me over there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this fun conversation, Dr. Brandy. It's been definitely very enlightening, informative for anyone who's maybe struggling with getting pregnant and they haven't been able to get answers from their doctor, which I know can be hard at times for some people.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.